Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Fran, and today I would like to talk about how repressed emotions and fears create, thus giving us the impression that our life happens to us or that things happen by chance or randomly. You see, repressed emotions are subtle because they can lay dormant for years without you realizing that they're still alive within you. You might even forget that a certain traumatic or painful event occurred in your life. You've you worked on your affirmations, you've distracted yourself, you kept really busy, and you've moved on. And then something traumatic or even a similar event occurs, and boom, you're right back where you were all those years ago. All that work that you've done over the years to try and forget that original event is gone out the window. You feel the same emotions with the same intensity as if no time has elapsed at all. Because guess what? Time is a concept that only the rational mind understands. The subconscious mind knows no difference between real and imagined, past and present, lived or remembered. Everything happens in the present moment. That is why when you ruminate or rehash past painful events over and over again in your mind, you keep reliving the event, making it more real, more present, more tangible, and trying to distract your mind or forget about these events as if they didn't happen is not going to solve the problem in the long run. Sure, there and then it might remove the immediate distress or emotional pain, but unless you revise, to use Neville Goddard's words, or record the event in your memory, then eventually it's bound to rear its ugly head again. And because it's been suppressed, sometimes for decades, the longer it festers, the stronger the emotions it will recruit on its way out. The thing is, you're probably likely to blame the present traumatic event for the intensity of those emotions, because as far as you're concerned, you'd already dealt with that past event, with those emotions. But it's like when you put an explosive in a lake, all the fish which were swimming below the surface will float to the top. But the explosive itself did not create the fish, did it? It simply showed you what was underneath, what you couldn't see before. This is why during the pandemic, there has been an explosion of mental health issues as well as failed relationships. Whether you believe that the pandemic was real or not, subconsciously, your survival instinct would have kicked in some of us more than others. The fear of the unknown, of the unpredictable, the uncertainty linked to not having the answers would have represented a trauma of sorts. And this trauma would have brought to the surface, just like an explosive in a lake, all our old repressed emotions and fears, which we were adamant that we had dealt with and resolved in the past. When you're going through a traumatic event, you're in fight or flight mode. Your subconscious mind kicks in and it frantically searches for similar past events in its memory bank in order to find a template for action. If you went through something similar before and survived, then you should probably react in the same way, right? So the subconscious unearths all these traumatic events which felt similar in search for a way out of the present traumatic event. Some people may have felt themselves even regress into childhood reactions. If you were abandoned by a parent, you're likely to reenact that scenario with a partner as your feelings of insecurity and rejection get reawakened. Even people who didn't feel scared or believed in the pandemic would have experienced some type of personal crisis. On the surface, completely unrelated to the global situation that we were facing at the time. And that is because the subconscious mind doesn't listen to reason or evidence or facts. The subconscious mind is merely concerned with survival. And for the purpose of survival, all that is unknown or uncertain is potentially dangerous. And what tells us when something is dangerous? Fear. That's why fears can be completely irrational and unjustified. So, in a way, as painful as they are, traumatic events can be very beneficial in that they unearth repressed fears that we didn't know were festering below the surface. and we're manifesting unwanted stuff in our life without us being aware of it. But in order to not waste the opportunity to heal this apparently forgotten trauma, we need to stare it straight in the face without running and hiding as we did in the past. We need to accept it, to accept this version of the story as we'd filed it away or recorded it all those years ago. Now, notice what I did there? Nothing in memory is factual. Memory is a constructive process. We tell ourselves a story about completely unrelated facts and events in order to remember something. We build a narrative. As we interact with people, we tell ourselves stories about them, about us, about life in general. We do this all the time, whether we are aware of it or not. There's always a running commentary in our heads. Memory also changes when you learn new facts about a certain past event. Different people will remember the same exact event in a completely different way. An event doesn't actually exist if not in our memory. A memory is nothing but a story that we tell ourselves. It will include a lot of factual evidence, but also interpretations, assumptions, beliefs, expectations, and feelings. So we have stored and filed this version of events in our memory bank, and this story has affected how we've lived our life since, even if we thought we had forgotten about it. But here's the thing, we can record or revise our old stories anytime. If a new traumatic or painful event brings to the surface an old memory, then that is an indication that that memory or that version of events needs revising. Revising means reinterpreting it. It means going back to that moment in the past and searching in our mind for alternative interpretations. Sometimes we can downright rewrite the whole thing as if we were changing the ending of a book. It doesn't matter if you believe the new story or not. Simply the act of imagining a different scenario is enough for the subconscious mind to record the event. Because as you know, if you've listened to any of my previous audios, the subconscious mind, again, does not know the difference between real and imagined, between past and present. So say you have a fear of abandonment, which has its roots in your childhood because maybe you lost a parent or you had a sick parent or one or both parents were emotionally unavailable. Whatever the cause, this fear may resurface in your present relationships when under stress or after a painful or traumatic event. You may find yourself overreacting to present partners and situations, and that's because you're reliving the original event in all its strength. In this case, you need to ask yourself, what is the deeper fear that is causing me to react this way? When did I feel in a similar way in the past? What felt in the past like I feel right now? What does this remind me of? And then when you have your answer, you need to go back to that original memory and simply imagine a different ending, a different scenario, a different interpretation of the same facts even. If you feel that imagining completely different facts makes you feel delusional, then imagine as many different interpretations for the same facts as possible. Just allow for a different interpretation to surface. And even better if you can write down these alternative narratives so you make them more real. But imagining a different event altogether should be a pleasant exercise. You could ask yourself, for instance, what if things had gone this way instead? And imagine your preferred scenario or outcome. That in itself is sufficient to disconnect your subconscious mind from that original memory, from that template. And that alone is enough to stop reproducing the same old outcome over and over again in the present. Revision may seem like a silly technique or too simplistic to create any real change in our core beliefs and in our subconscious blueprint. But in reality, it's a really powerful tool, not only for psychological healing, but also for transformation in all areas of our lives. If you revise your past events and look at them under a different light, as you adopt a different perspective and rewrite the story of your life, you will see your life change drastically in the present. You will come to realize that what created your present circumstances was the story you told yourself about your past history. How we choose to remember the past is how we create our future in the present moment. Of course, you can manifest your desired reality simply by living in the end or from the end, as Neville Goddard said. But if your past history tells you that you're unlikely to experience what you desire in the future, then you need to revise the events which contributed to you developing that belief in the first place, or else you will forever self-sabotage to prove that belief right over and over again. Now, you cannot revise past events from a victim's perspective, just like you cannot experience happiness while holding on to emotional pain. Something's got to give. You need to be willing to let go of your original memory, even for a few short minutes, while you create a different imaginal scene. And this may seem easier said than done, as you've relived that story in imagination so many times that you've become attached to it. But that's okay. You don't have to give it up completely. Simply imagine what would have happened if things had gone differently. So don't be shocked if the threat of the pandemic has brought to the surface forgotten fears and phobias, relationship issues, uncertainty, childhood insecurities, and extreme emotional reactions. Don't be afraid to look into those memories, those stories, and those emotions. It's only by first acknowledging them, then by rewriting or recording them, that they can be resolved and our emotions unlocked. It's only by realizing all painful events that we can manifest something different in the future. Someone once said to me, history is written by those who won the wars. No truer words were ever spoken. There is nothing factual or straightforward about history or life in general, except the story that we write or tell about it. We're just like a historian writing about past wars. And because we have somehow survived, we feel entitled to tell the story of how we were invaded or oppressed. And we tell that story over and over again. We've printed it and people just keep reading it and it becomes more and more real. And guess what? In order to change the future, we need to rewrite the history books, change how we look at or interpret or remember the past. And once we do that, life will mysteriously align. People will align to our new beliefs as if by magic. Because as Neville Goddard used to say, everyone is you pushed out. Or as Eckhart Tolle maintains, everyone in your life is also a figment of your imagination, as if you were dreaming. Everyone in your dream would be created by your dreamy mind. Of course, you wouldn't know this unless you woke up. To the dreamer, the dream feels real and it feels independent of his or her will. You cannot control what happens in the dream, unless that is, you realize that you're dreaming and become a lucid dreamer. Then you can start deciding the direction of your dream. Once you come to realize that your subconscious mind is the autopilot which manifests or creates reality from a blueprint, then you can reprogram the autopilot to access knowledge and resources which would ordinarily not be available to the dreamer or to the dreaming mind. Although we are dreaming this stuff up, once conjured up by the mind, the stuff feels and looks real. There is a beautiful story told by a famous Indian mystic called Sadhguru, who you will probably know. This story from the yogic tradition goes as follows. A man goes for a walk and finds himself in paradise. After walking for a long time, he feels tired and thinks to himself, I wish there was somewhere to rest. So he comes across a Kalpa Vriksha tree, roughly translated as wish tree, and he lays down under the tree and falls asleep, and he has a beautiful sleep. When he wakes up, he's really hungry and thinks to himself, I wish I could eat something. And then food comes. He's surprised by this stuff, but is too hungry to think about how the food came. You know, an empty stomach can only focus on the need for food. Then, after eating, he feels thirsty. and wishes he could drink something. So drinks of all sorts come to him. After drinking, he felt a little inebriated and started thinking, wow, every time I think of something, this something arrives right on cue. There must be ghosts around. So ghosts came. As ghosts came, he thought to himself, they will torture and kill me. And so they did. Doesn't this story remind you of the law of assumption or even of Niels Bohr's interpretation of quantum physics? None of it is real in our 3D reality, and yet all of it is. Our subconscious mind observes it all into reality or creates it all unbeknownst to us until we become aware that our mind is creating all of it. But if, like the men in this story, we believe that life happens to us, that our mind has nothing to do with it, if we try to suppress the subconscious mind with addictions and substances, then our suppressed fears, our ghosts, will do the manifesting for us. We thought those fears into reality. We made those ghosts real by the power of our imagination. Now, if instead of thinking that something outside of us creates reality, we realize that we first imagined everything that we experience out there in the 3D world of form, then there are no ghosts to be afraid of, and death only exists as long as we believe in it. Now, this story is very similar to Adam and Eve expulsion from the Garden of Eden. But there is no vindictive God out there, no ghosts. The only monsters which create are our fears, and our fears are a figment of our imagination. When you remember that you had created these ghosts in your mind first, then they will disappear. We have free will to imagine and create heaven or hell. If we don't like what we've imagined so far, we can simply imagine something different. So this is it for today. I intend that this audio helps you rewrite the story of your life so that you can manifest from your present desires rather than from past trauma. If you've come this far and found this content interesting and helpful, so please remember to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell option for all notifications of my future videos. In any case, thank you for listening. Have a wonderful awakened life.